Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show. I, of course, am not Nigel Hannaford. I am Jen Hodgson, filling in for Nigel while he's away for the next couple of weeks. It's Thursday, January 30th, 2025, and my guest today is Alberta Senator-elect Erika Barootes. But first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of the Hannaford Show is sponsored by New World Precious Metals, based right here in Alberta. Years of inflationary money printing and rising debt have decimated the average Canadian savings. Gold and silver are the only currencies that have held their value for thousands of years, and last year saw 30% gains. NWPM offers unique platforms to help protect and grow your hard-earned wealth with gold and silver. Check out newworldpm.com. Erika Barootes is the department head of the Applied Politics and Public Affairs Specialist program at Makami College. She formerly served as the principal secretary to Premier Danielle Smith and the Alberta Government Director of Issues Management and Campaign Operations. Erika is also the founding president of the United Conservative Party of Alberta, and she co-hosts the Discourse podcast. Erika, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to have you, to be here. I was going to say to have you hosting instead of Nigel while he's away. It's a fresh face.
It's a different face. I'm a far cry from Nigel Hannaford in many different ways. So first, tell us about the Applied Politics program at Makami College.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I have a long history in politics, and Makami actually approached me while I was still in Premier's office. I'd always said that I was there for the Premier to win the election, and which is why I left to help with the campaign. I'm sitting in my office right now. I don't know if it's in reverse of the screen, but these are all the classes we offer and that we're currently developing. So
Wow.
the concept came because an individual from Makami had an idea that they were like, how do you teach what you know? And I'm like, good question. And they said, well, what training do you have? And I went to the University of Calgary, took political science, but nothing that I really learned there applies to the real world of politics. I didn't learn how to do stakeholder relations, how to write briefing notes, how to talk to a minister, create key messages. And so I was like, this is the program I wish I had taken because I got into politics when I was 18 years old, and that there was a kind of a guide. Secondly to that, I've worked in many roles in government, political offices, campaigns, and elections. And it was like, well, what other tools? How to write lit pieces, how to write campaign materials, how to door knock. And so I took all the collective 20 years experience that I have, along with bringing some other experts in this field into create these programs with me on what I wish I knew when I went into what I wish I got out of my political science degree and what I wish I knew getting into politics.
Wow. So what they're teaching in political science, different various programs at university, it's not really the hands-on approach that you're describing at Makami College, as I understand.
Yeah, it's a lot of the theory. I learned a lot about Plato and Aristotle, besides
Sure.
maybe a dinner table conversation. Don't really use that in today's political arena. So it is that applied, the applied is underlined, applied politics and public affairs. What do you do when you work for a firm? In a public relations or public affairs or government relations type area? If you're working for not-for-profit, how do you do advocacy and stakeholder relations, fundraising, campaigns, and elections? So whether you're thinking about running, you have a little bit of experience in politics, but you really want to formalize it. You want to work for government, political parties, or again, that not-for-profit or private sector. This will give you those tools to make you kind of a superstar, in my opinion.
Sounds like it. And as far as I understand, this is the only program of its kind in Canada.
It is, yes. So we kind of modeled some of the products that the Manning Center had once upon a time created on those campaigns, elections, fundraising, the how-tos, as well as Carleton University. Now, Carleton University in the post-secondary is probably the closest, but it is a master's program. So
Oh, right.
differs from our program because it is a diploma
Mhm.
and the credentials are high school or high school equivalent. So
Right.
you could do this right out of there. And we've been working closely actually with homeschoolers as well to create the policies for them to get involved.
Oh, cool. So you're seeing a lot of homeschools and more like ambitious young individuals that are just wanting to get going in their political career.
Well, we're 2 classes in, of our pilot program. We officially launch in
Congratulations.
September. Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, it's been great. We have an individual that wants to run for city council in Edmonton,
Um,
and so she's sharing her journey. We have individuals that are newcomers that are very want to be patriotic for Canada and understand the government system. We have individuals that just want to learn more or want to work in political parties. So I still think we're trying to figure out who our student demographic is, but we didn't want to limit it by saying you have to go have a degree to get this program or these skills. Because frankly, if I was still working in government or politics, this program, a 2-year program, would be far more appealing from the tangible skills for to hire someone than someone that spent 4 years, getting all those general studies, having to do some anthropology and geology courses, not applying any of it to how the world of politics really works.
Sure. This seems like a very acute focus program contrasted with first year university or even throughout a 4-year degree, the different survey cases, survey classes that students have to take. So it looks like it prepares them to just jump on the ground running whenever they finish their diploma. Is there an opportunity for internship or co-op
Yes,
placement?
that's a great. So we actually, similar to a co-op and an internship, we actually have 3 practicums, and the purpose of that is when I took co-op at the University of Calgary, I think I learned more of like what I didn't want to do than
Yeah,
what I wanted to do,
I
and
get
so I
that.
had certain. Like, yeah, I did some research at the U of C, and I was like, this is not for me. No, no, thank you. But what I did learn through that is like you just need a little bit of a taste of it. So we have two, one in our first year, pretty close to the end of your first year, and you'll take a practicum for the individuals in January. This will fall around kind of right before Stampede, late June, early July. And they'll be able to get involved, kind of shadow individuals or within different areas within this industry.
Sounds
And
great.
then, yeah. And so then in their second year, they get a little bit more because they'll have more skills.
Mhm.
And we found some really great practicum partners, but call out if anyone is interested. We're looking for a good breadth of experience that our students could have. And then the last piece is a 360 hour. The first 2 are only 80, so about 2 weeks.
Mhm.
360, which would be truly an internship. And they will have gone through the whole program where they'll end building an advocacy campaign from start to finish. We also will teach them how to build a local campaign from start to finish and everything in between. So they could come out and help you organize your Stampede event, or they can help you organize a fundraising event, or they can help you with client relations on, doing an analysis of what a government announcement or policy introduction was and what it means for their client.
That sounds awesome. It's great to hear that there's opportunities for young people to get so involved right away and get that firsthand experience doing these different campaigns and political advocacy. So I have to ask, there has been some apparent controversy over whether Makami College is a private or publicly funded institution. Can you
Mhm.
clear that up for us?
I absolutely can, because this has been my life. In addition to this, I do all of our external relations. So I've been working through this process. They were a private career college. In March 30th of 2023, so right before the general election, there was an order in council signed designating them as an independent academic institute. That falls within the post secondary or the PSLA Act, as a collective. So when I explain it, traditionally the independent academic institutes were your faith-based schools. It's not really the case. Jason Kenney kind of changed some of that purview, but it's Concordia, King's University, St. Mary's, Ambrose, Berman University. And so we've been added to that, where we went through a process. We started it. Goodness gracious, it's a whole nother conversation of 18 months of work to be able to move from the Private Vocational Training Act to the Post-Secondary Learning Act. We've worked with the government seamlessly through that, with a few hiccups, but we've collectively worked through to get us to a place where, in addition to that, we actually also transitioned to being a not-for-profit. So most
Right.
private career colleges are for profit, makes sense, but that was a big hurdle, and our final hurdle that we've finally done. You might see that as an announcement soon, but it is part of our process. We've been trying to, explain that to as many folks as possible.
Mhm.
And so what the IAIs receive from government supports, and we'll see in the next budget, we haven't received any government funding yet,
Okay.
especially because we were still a for profit, and I can completely understand why the government, that could be concerns, but
Yeah.
we meet now all of the credentials. And so, but the difference with an independent academic institute is they don't qualify for capital grants.
Okay.
Maintenance/operational is what they qualify for. So anything towards students, teachers, instruction, but not building, or having too much money and putting a statue on your property to spend taxpayer dollars. But that's also another conversation
For
of
sure.
use of capital grants.
Well, good
Yeah,
to hear that you're
so
a
it's
little
been a journey. Trust me,
sure.
it's so happy that we're finally across that finish line.
Yes, I can imagine that it would be. So any revenue that comes into the college from student tuition, that would then go back into the college itself?
And typically, that's how they've ran a very lean operation as a private career college. One of the reasons I chose Makami as a place was I got a tour, and we offer free tutoring. We offer free academic supports. Like, we help them navigate the lens and the scope of that. We have tutoring and counseling for also family members, because our student demographic sometimes has more needs than maybe your more traditional post-secondary institution. We felt that the wraparound services, and helping them navigate food security, housing, et cetera, was a big barrier for many of them. And so from when it was created 21 years ago as a college, that's been very much the foundation of who we are and what we do.
Right.
So
Okay.
now we can just do more.
That must be a good feeling, and it's good to see
Mhm.
this kind of more innovative, thoughtful approach to how young people can move forward in a career without going through all of these survey courses, as we mentioned, about going through getting the four-year diploma degree
Mhm.
and then deciding what to do, and oftentimes that will more tell us what we don't want to do.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I think, at Maccabi College, and you'll see that at other colleges across Alberta as well, is that you get a more mature learner as well. So we get people that want to change careers. We get people, and I suspect these are kind of the student demographics. People are like, I love politics. I am involved with the debate club. I am part of like myself, part of a campus club, or as a youth rep on a board at a very young age, or my parents took me to conventions or things like that, that
Right.
if you know that's where you want to end up,
Mhm.
why go through all of the bells and whistles and hoops to get there when you have this program that can teach you exactly what you need to know to find that career of your dreams? Or if you're unhappy in your role, or you want to add to your skill set, these courses are built for people that also work full time, and so they'll have the abilities. Our next pilot, so it's a reduced tuition fee of a 50%, but we're still,
Oh, nice.
working out some of the kinks. We'll launch that in May, and we're actually launching it online. And so it'll be 2 evenings a week, for about 3.5 hours maximum on each of those nights. And you'll be able to do breakout work, collaborative work in the same way you would in the classroom. But we'll open it up so that it's not a barrier for people that don't live in Edmonton and Calgary, where we have our campuses. So we're hoping that this will be a more broader appeal to all Albertans that maybe are doing some grassroots politics right now, or some grassroots advocacy, and just want to learn those skills and tools that we're teaching through our program.
Absolutely. That sounds really good. So
Yeah,
let's
thank you.
turn now to the leadership of Premier
Mhm.
Danielle Smith. So we'll start off by speaking about this upcoming tariff war
Mhm.
that is potentially coming between Canada and the US. So Premier Smith went against the grain from the beginning of her Canadian counterparts, so including premiers, including the federal government. And she went and pursued relationships with her American counterparts herself, even visiting Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump. So the federal government and other and other premiers, meanwhile, have taken a more aggressive approach, threatening tit for tat tariffs on the Americans. And Trump himself has indicated that if it weren't actually for Smith's influence, the tariffs might already be in place. And so now we're expecting them to go into effect February 1st, this coming Saturday. How do you think the premier has done in her approach to Trump's
Mhm.
administration? And what do you see happening on Saturday?
Well, I think the fact that the premier of the or the prime minister, or goodness gracious, I'm getting my titles wrong. I don't do that in class, I promise. But the president of the United States is commending her efforts and saying
Mhm.
that there was national benefit, I think says it all. But one of the things, and when I worked for Premier Smith, when she just came into office, is the things I love about her is she'll go against the grain for what she believes to be the right thing. And I think Albertans were very proud, regardless of what side of the aisle you identify with, was that she was championing Alberta and Alberta first, as well as Canada. She was the only one pounding pavement, having those conversations, taking the risk to go down first to Mar-a-Lago and then to the inauguration. I think strategically, one of the best parts of that mission was actually that she went a few days before the inauguration. And
Mm.
that is because there was a lot of social settings. There's a lot of galas and
Mhm.
informal settings where she was able to build those relationships, rub elbows with a lot of the influential people in a non boardroom way, and really be able to have fulsome conversations, off the record conversations, about the critical importance of our energy sector being exported, and really share the story. Because I think that if you listen to
Mm.
President Trump talk about the tariff deficit, he's quite inaccurate on the level of it. We're more of partners than we are takers of
Mhm.
their resources. And so then when it comes to, I mean, we have a lame duck prime minister. He was
Yes.
ragging a puck, doing nothing. So at very least, I think everyone could be like, well, someone stepped up for our national interests. And ultimately, oil and gas is a national interest because, I mean, again, we could get into equalization payments. We could talk about how the supports of the energy sector help all of Canada. And so, as he's sitting there thinking about his last 2 weeks as, an irrelevant prime minister that's going to go down in history as possibly the worst, and he's on his way out watching his leadership race take place, he doesn't have street cred. He doesn't have a
Mhm.
mandate to go down there, and so at least he had enough common sense to remove himself. But kind of let some other. We saw Premier Doug Ford step up as
Yep.
well in a more aggressive way. Didn't get the
Mhm.
same positive reception that Premier Smith did. And then instead of, so I think Canada was saying there's a lack of a united Canada approach. And to Premier Smith's credit, she did focus on both Canada, but Alberta's interest in the skin in the game. So, yeah, they're all going to complain because they sat on their hands doing nothing. And then when they do come up with what they called a Team Canada approach, it was like, oh, well, you're the only collateral we're putting up. So I'm very proud that the premier did not sign the communique saying that we're going to put everything on the table. Because if it truly was
Mhm.
a united front, we would have put up the manufacturing industry, we would have put up the automotive industry, and we didn't see that happen from all the other premiers. So, all in all, I think she's doing a great job. I think she is pivoting now to say, we're playing nice, but, and so we'll see what happens come Saturday versus after the fact. I believe that the tariffs are still coming in. We heard recently her call for the border czar. Don't love that name, but a border czar. And I think if you ever look at what the President Trump does, is he like argues for things that's not really what he wants. I think he really wanted Canada to smarten up and get strong border control, and saying the tariffs are the punishment if you don't. And so he can always walk it back. He can always make exceptions.
Mhm.
But I think we're actually heading as a nation and as a province in the right direction on how to navigate when you have a challenger that is President Trump and tariffs are on the table. But we'll see how the rest of the premiers and our lame duck prime minister step up. But I think if we're going to put everything on the table, we've got to put everything on the table and not just sell Alberta short.
Yes, and not just these talking points too that we see of attempting to strong arm President Trump's administration. So, as you mentioned, he has been really clear about the weak borders and that this is a real issue, and he's taking it very seriously. Just yesterday in the U.S. Senate, we heard testimony that Americans were dying because of this Canadian drug plant that they've
Mhm.
discovered here. And so we see this going on, and the Americans are really taking it seriously. And the federal government, as you say, we have a lame duck prime minister. He announced his intent to resign at the beginning of January, several weeks ago now. Yet he's still acting as though he is the man in charge, let's say.
Mhm.
He just went to Ukraine and signed that deal with the Ukrainian president. So, oh, excuse me, Poland. He just went to Poland
Mhm.
and signed that agreement. So we really see him attempting to act as prime minister, though, as you mentioned, to quote you, he's lost his street cred. He doesn't have the mandate and he doesn't have the support. And we really see the federal government floundering. Our safety
Mhm.
minister this morning is in Washington trying to strike up an 11th hour bid to get these tariffs quashed, but we keep going and pleading. Like I say we, what I mean is the feds. Ottawa
Mhm.
keeps going and pleading, just like Trump or Trudeau did when he went down to Mar-a-Lago back in November when this even first became a possibility. And we see Melanie Joly trying to take this Team Canada approach too. And we don't really have anyone that seems to be capable in our federal government. They're scrambling with this leadership race and refusing to recall Parliament, which might actually make a difference. So to see Premier Smith rising above all of this and just foregoing protocol as dictated by Ottawa, she's really going and making a stand, as you say, for Team Alberta and Team Canada.
Mhm.
Trump put these tariffs off, and has said as much because of her efforts to build those relationships. And you're absolutely right. It's not just about sitting down at committee and making agreements. It's about that connection. They're people too. So going and telling stories and having a laugh, breaking bread, all of
Mhm.
these things are going to lead to much more constructive discussions between our two nations. And we just don't see that from Ottawa. So I'm also really thankful that we have a premier here in Alberta that is willing to take that stand and make those strides for a better Canada.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in there, Jen. I think something that you said was important is like there has been effort by the federal government to go down, but you have to remember that Trump is first an entrepreneur. And if you show up being like, please don't do this, sir, without a business plan or a case or proof and
Mhm.
facts that of what you are willing to do or what you have done, I think that's the difference because Premier Smith has said, like, this is the importance of export. This is what we get it from. This is what you get. This is the business case for why you should, because come Monday of like February 3rd or whatever it'll be, prices of gas are going to go up for you guys. This is
Right.
going to change, and people, it's not going to have the impact immediately that I think it's going to have. It's going to hurt your administration. And so building that business case for him, I think will resonate more than if you're just like asking for handouts. Like if anyone, if they came down with a true border plan and said, this is what we're going to put in place, and here's the KPIs, here's the metrics, here's the timelines, here's the investment, like you would in any business meeting, I think it could go a long way, but they're
Mhm.
just amateurs and they just don't understand how to navigate such a powerful opponent.
Yeah, please don't do it, sir, isn't really
Yeah.
going to cut it here, right?
Mm.
Now, we just have a minute or two left, but
Mhm.
just before I let you go, Erika, I'm interested to hear your response to the Alberta government releasing the COVID-19 response task force review
Mhm.
report last Friday. So,
Yeah,
if
we can
yeah,
jump
so
right on in. So I did cover this in my in the podcast that I'm a co-host of, the discourse. So I obviously represent the right side of things and everything. And my opponent used to work for Rachel Notley. So I think we can all agree that society has a lot of, head butting on a lot of issues. I think COVID's a prime example, and our episode does get a little heated. But what we try to do is have the discourse, to have the conversation about the why the government does this, what the challenges are, what the other side would say, in a constructive manner. Now, this one was a little spicier than normal about the COVID report, as well as on coal. But I think my biggest takeaway is what the intent was. And I'm happy that I was in the Premier's office when she was developing this task force. And it was important because she traveled the province and she heard of the hardships and the challenges and the alienation that many people faced during COVID-19. And let's look at everything. Let's put everything on the table, alternative medicine. The whole point of science is to challenge science. And I think that was the intent of this report. Now, I know many people on the report, and I have a lot of respect for them. I do think, though, that the report didn't really hit the mark of what a government commissioned report typically looks like. And what I mean by that is there's 45 recommendations, but a lot of them are vague and hard to implement. And a lot of them
transparency.
Yes. Oh, I was going to say, I said that in the podcast. I'm like, if I have to hear transparent, someone give them a synonym for this. And I do think transparency was a big piece that caused difficultness. I think secrecy. I think, what's in the best interest of all. Again, I think lessons learned was a huge piece. We shouldn't have taken kids out of the classroom. Look at the long-term effect it had on their learning, their social skills, especially those in grade 1, 2, and 3 during that time. And I have a stepdaughter in that. We noticed a significant challenge in how much the teachers did or didn't do. We had one fabulous teacher with one stepdaughter and not so much. So it really, I think, impacted the next generation. Same with what we've seen with sports. And that's not maybe as important to me as the academic side. Also about some of the mandates and the rules and regulations really alienating populations and punishing business owners. I think those are some of the key things that came out in the report that we should make sure that the next time you have that perspective and lens. I just feel like the report itself wasn't written in a critical compare and contrast way. It felt like it was very wordy in a biased sense. And I think that's why we saw the government not come out as typically you see on a lot of reports being like, out of the 45 recommendations, we are looking at implementing X, Y, and Z, which is very typical standard process. Now, on our podcast, we talk about, well, why was it put out if it was anti-science or whatever it is? Reports through the government, if they are commissioned, I think we can all agree, you have an accountability to taxpayers, whether you think it's a bang up job of a report or not. You have to release it and also show respect for the people that put hours and time into it. They do mention that they didn't get to cover their full scope or that there's more work to be done in certain areas. But all in all, I think it was unfortunate maybe how some of it was written, because I think that you can get the sentiment, but the tactics and recommendations are very hard to
they were
adopt.
kind of woven in, as though it was just all, part of the narrative that was being presented in this report. It didn't seem like there were concrete, firm recommendations. But the chief recommendation that stood out for me was about, okay, so if there's a potential pandemic coming again, we're going to return to the pre-2020 pandemic guidance when normal society functioned as normal. There was no disruption in the community. There weren't these lockdowns and masking requirements, like the mandated masking. But most importantly, the report states to avoid coerced vaccination of any population. And so I'd like to know what you think, how you think the Alberta government, Premier Smith's administration might actually approach this moving forward if we do encounter something like this again.
Yes. And so, I mean, first of all, returning to 2020 after we've all lived it is near impossible. You can try your best, but that's kind of rainbows and sunshine perspective, I think, to be able to revert back to that, because we know what we know. When it comes to, not forced mandate vaccinations and no mandates, the premier actually did campaign on that. She's talked about it. As we do with our education, with our religion, all of that, we believe in freedom of choice in this province. And so those that love freedom and, their individual and human rights, she did address a lot of those things through the Human Rights Act that they reviewed. She has said that it's not mandated to get vaccines, but they're also not, which I think is fair, limiting it and removing it for those who want it. It's just as important for those that want it than those that maybe don't want it. And it's not freedom to have you have the ability to tell someone what they can and cannot do. So I think what they've actually put in place is really hitting, like you said, Jen, that high overarching umbrella item of this report, which is individual choice. Should we revisit it? I think some of those more tactical, like at what threshold would we close things down, and really realize, who are those vulnerable populations and what can we put in place to protect them while allowing other people to socialize that are not going to be, big spreaders or something like that, because I think that there is a better balance than what we all witnessed. But I think that it's always going to be difficult. It's always going to upset people. But I believe, and the reason I love that I'm a conservative is it's that freedom piece where don't tell me what to do, get out of my house. In this case, they did come into your houses. And so I think it's just the government has already done a lot of the high level things and the commitment that she made to the people when she was campaigning. So I think the report is just, again, to close that chapter, hopefully, provide recommendations. But again, that 45 probably could have been taken to 10 and been more concise on that deliverable or the execution of those recommendations.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And also, just in addition to that, before we wrap up, is the full disclosure of their potential risks. So that was also explicitly stated in the report. And I thought that was really important too, so that Albertans can really make their own informed decision, not just going along with these biases that are put out from AHS and the other, acronym organizations.
Yeah, I have a lot of apprehension towards things that are issued by those organizations, including the Alberta Medical Association. The reason I say that is that we know sometimes organizations don't speak for all their members. It's also a case where if one of those physicians doesn't agree, they can be fired, right? So there's a huge risk for people to stand up or stand against what their association is saying. And I know a lot of physicians, including some on the panels, that, were at threat of losing their license or were fired or removed. Yeah. And I think that that's a big thing to challenge, is that there's not these experts. The only people that are true experts are like me on what is in my best interest, and experts that specialize in pandemics. It's like me asking my family physician to do surgery on, my appendix. That doesn't happen, right? There's radiologists and specialists for a reason. So I think that sometimes those associations come out with a lot of vibrato where they actually don't have the credibility to do so.
Wow. Yeah. And so we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for giving insight into all of these matters and talking to us about the program at Makami College. This is Erika Barootes, the Department Head of Applied Politics and Public Affairs Specialist Program at Makami College. Thank you, Erika.
Thanks so much. And I'm going to tell Nigel, you need to be on shows more. I love it.
Oh, yeah, this has been really fun.
Okay, hopefully take care.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Western Standard viewers, and good evening.